Good evening. I'm speaking to you from Australia. It's 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. Thank you for listening in, and it's a great thrill to be part of this innovative conference that has been so hastily and thoroughly well organised by Ray Pointer. Today I'm going to talk to you about sampling the Twitter stream, and this is a combined paper or thought stream of myself, Christine Walker from Alliance Strategic Research, Tim Bull from Tribalytic, which is a technology solution for tracking Twitter, and Jonathan Sargent, who is a statistician. Just as by way of background about why we've done this and how we've come to be interested in understanding the impact of sampling tweets rather than looking at all of them. At the moment we collect tweets for all Australian banks, and that may sound rather daunting, but there's really not as many as there are in some other countries. We have 4 major banks in Australia which are very dominant, and they really have the lion's share of the market. And then there are further about 10 players who play in quite different sections of the market, either in internet-based or, but they're smaller banks and they're second tier, and there's not really a lot of comment about them. What we're doing with that commentary that is produced in Twitter is we're classifying it along themes. So we're interested in what the substantial content of the tweet is, what is the meaning, what is the comment, what is it that people are either trying to say to the banks or to each other about banks. And in doing so, we're trying to establish some insight from the comment and provide feedback to the banks about spontaneous comment in the Australian market about banks. So we do this on a monthly, essentially on a monthly basis, and the information that we're going to be looking at today was for July, and in July there was a total of 6,145 tweets that we identified. It's important to note that we identify the tweets by brand. So we're not looking for any comment that's about a bank that just contains the word bank. We're also wanting to be sure that we have the brand name within the tweet. So the research question that we posed was, we know that we collect every tweet that we can. What would happen if we actually started collecting a sample of tweets? Would the tweet profile be similar, or would it in fact be a slightly different bird? So what we did is we took data from July, and we've taken all of the bank tweets that we've collected as being the population, and we've tested 2 sampling methodologies against the population. So we've tested a sample of tweeters, so we've taken people and a number of people rather than every tweet, and then we've taken a sample of tweets. And the question we've basically posed is which will best mirror our classification of the total tweets for July. So the Twitter sample, so this is the people-based sample, is a product that's been built by Tim Bull of Tribalytic. This is a sample of 220,000 Twitter accounts, and they are all located in Australia. So these are people who've identified themselves as living in Australia in their Twitter profile, either by country or by city. The accounts that we're talking about here are people who are actively tweeting, so if somebody who has an account but they don't tweet very often, then they're not included in this 220,000 Twitter accounts. There's an estimated about 1.2 million accounts in Australia. So quite actively, spam and news services have been excluded from this particular product, and the number of tweets in the sample for the same period in July was 1,893. If you wish, you can have a look at Tribalytic. It's at tribalytic.com, and you can see the profile of the product there. The second thing that we did was to take simply a sample of all of the tweets that we've collected. So we randomly selected these using SPSS, and we took a number of tweets in the sample of being 2,000. So out of the 6,145, we've selected 2,000 tweets. And the contest is to see which of these 2 approaches will best reflect our classification of every single tweet. So to start with, we'll have a look at the tweeters. Now the first slide that we're going to look at is simply about the number of banks, the profile of the banks. And the slide here shows that the light blue bar is population and the dark blue is the sample. And you can see, and this is proportioned, so they're comparable data sets, so that you can see ANZ is in fact the only bank brand where the sample and the population is seems to be significantly similar at a 90% confidence level. So in fact CBA, Westpac and NAB are quite different than the population. With CBA we know why this is. CBA in slang means couldn't be asked, and it's a very common slang term in the United States. By actually only using Australian-based Twitterers, it does change the profile quite considerably of CBA, and we're able to extract that information more easily. We can't in Australia just isolate CBA by itself, because if we do that we get a phenomenal number of tweets, like tens of thousands of tweets that are just about couldn't be asked rather than CBA. So we have to use co-occurrence of terms in order to isolate CBA. The reason for the profile of the others isn't immediately clear, but the fact is that the profile does look quite different when we use that sample of 220,000 tweeters. When we move on to the topics that we classify, we see quite a lot of differences, and I'm showing you this graph here, which is what I call a naughty research graph. It's got far too much information on it, and it's the kind of thing one dreads seeing in a presentation, but there it is. I just wanted to throw this up so that you can quickly have a look at it and see that we track about 39 topics, and you can see that clearly in some of those topics there's a very considerable difference in the proportion of tweets that are that we've classified under the sample. Let's have a look at that in summary, which makes it a little bit clearer. So we have 39 terms or themes that we are classifying upon. And we found when we used the tribelytic sample that 11 of the themes were similar to the population at a 90% confidence level. 14 of the themes in the sample were significantly different to the population, and 14 of the themes just simply had insufficient comment to do any sort of statistical analysis of, so they typically had less than 10 tweets. So what happens here is that the proportion of tweets that grouped into these themes successfully that we've been tracking was only about 36% for the sample database and 31% for the population database. So this experiment with the tribelytics system isn't actually looking that positive. When we sampled the tweets, in contrast, we found a lot more agreement. Now that kind of, I think, intuitively would make sense to everybody. So rather than trying to isolate who it is that's talking, we're actually saying let's look at the body of tweets and take only a proportion of them and see how that reflects what we understand about every single tweet when we code it. And as you can see immediately, the profile of the banks in the population versus our smaller sample looks quite similar, and we can be quite confident that in fact the profile of the brands is similar in our sample to our population of tweets. When we look at the themes, we see a very much stronger level of agreement between the sample and the population overall. There are some areas where there isn't, and really why that might be isn't particularly clear, but they do tend to be on topics where there's slightly lower level of comment. So when we look at this in summary, I'll just transition to the next slide, we see that 26 of the 39 themes were similar to the population at a 90% confidence level, and only 8 of the themes was the sample significantly different to the population, and there were just 5 themes that had insufficient comment. So what we're seeing here is the ability of a far smaller sample to reflect the population is quite a bit higher than it was when we followed just the tweeters. So the proportion of tweets grouped into significant themes was 83% of the sample base and 77% of the population. So we're really able to in this way match up quite strongly using a sample to the population. our conclusion, therefore, is on this topic that sampling people, which is typically what we do in research, or Twitter accounts, actually provided a poorer reflection of the total comment on this topic. And in fact, sampling the comment provides an overall good picture of all comments. And I think one thing I do want to emphasise here is that I am talking about this topic, and this topic is quite important. When we talk about bank conversation in Australia, it is primarily about people going online or into their Twitter account on one occasion to tweet once about something that they have to say about their bank. It's not common for conversation, and it's not common for people to be commenting very frequently. So that will affect the outcome of this sampling approach also. In summary then, and the implications for researchers are this: well, typically it's very easy to collate comment from Twitter, but really reducing the data set is clearly quite possible by sampling the comment rather than collating it all. And as we're finding the Twitter is increasingly, it's just growing so much every single month. We're probably gaining about 1,000 tweets a month with banks at the moment. So we're going to have to start doing something to samples. But it does presuppose that the key interest is in the comment. So if you're interested in who's influencing whom or what the pattern of comment is between people, this approach really is not effective. We would recommend that you need to do some analysis of the total stream first to understand what the profile of that stream is, who the conversationalists are, and what's going on within. And you probably would need to test some different sample size. We would do this now. I think 2,000's a little bit too few. We may well use slightly more. And this approach is useful for analysis. It's not useful if you want to actually identify each comment and respond to it. So that concludes my presentation today. I hope that's been informative or useful to you in some way. And we'll go to question and answer. Thank you.